Alldus podcast is brought to you by Alldus International, supplying your expert AI and digital transformation staffing needs across the US and Europe. Today, you are listening to our AI in Action series, where leading minds in AI from across the world share their story, success, and advice. AI in Action cuts through the hype and explores the true impact of artificial intelligence in our world today.
You're listening to AI in Action. I'm your host, JP Valentine. Our guest today is Daniel Brady. Daniel is the CEO at Orita.ai. Daniel, welcome to the show.
Thanks so much for having me, JP. It's great to be here.
So Daniel, let's start with yourself, please, as we do with all of our guests. Could you give us an overview of your background in tech and where you got started, some of the roles you've held along the way, and what's led you to where you are today as the CEO at Orita.ai?
So I actually used to be a neuroscientist. So I have a PhD in neurobiology, and I made the switch from academia into tech about a decade ago. And since then, I've led or started data teams at a few startups or D2C companies. I actually fell into tech accidentally. A friend of mine was the CTO at a same-day delivery startup in 2013. And I just left academia, and he was like, hey, why don't you help us on this problem that's kind of mathy? And then we solved it, and it made a huge difference for their company, and they hired me as their first employee. So I kind of stumbled into it, but I got addicted to the speed at which technology moves. And so my quip is that I used to study real neurons, and now I study artificial ones. So I feel like a lot of my day-to-day is similar, but yeah, that's what I do.
So how did you, before co-founding Orita Consulting, which is now Orita.ai, what was your path to where you are today? You gave us some insight on the early roles, but what was that evolution like?
Yeah, I think as I've always been the first data hire at a company, either the startups that I've worked at full time, or when we did consulting, it was always like how to really start data teams from scratch. What are the sort of big data problems that a lot of e-commerce and a lot of brands face? And it's particularly relevant because usually most data scientists and machine learning engineers, a lot of them work at Facebook and Google and stuff like that, which has this huge tech infrastructure to serve them. But that's not necessarily true of brands. And so myself and my co-founder, Zach, have specialized in what does it look like to start from the ground up. So as I mentioned, I was the first employee at this company called One, which is the same day delivery service. And it was like, how do you optimize that sort of logistic nightmare of last mile delivery? And so that's obviously a huge data science problem. And I first started in a lot of data roles that were in more logistics-based companies, but then that naturally led to talking to other companies in the e-commerce space, which leads you down almost very quickly down the marketing pathway, right? So a lot of the pain that a lot of e-commerce and especially D2C brands face are typically either in logistics or in marketing. And so I've worked on all sorts of problems, consulting problems or full-time roles in either of those sorts of things. And that's where we started. The reason why Zach and I decided to start first as our own consulting firm and then eventually turned it into a product-led company was that we just kept seeing the same problems over and over again, right? People were constantly trying to understand how to solve tricky problems with data, who to market to, who not to market to, how to organize returns and how to look at refunds and think about fraud and all these sorts of things. And so we developed a set of playbook in order to attack those problems. And the idea was by opening ourselves to consulting, we would eventually find something to productize. So that was always the goal. What are we doing that is super repeatable that we can make into software as a service? And so we view it as almost like paid research into finding something that was repeatable over and over for brands.
And that's a great segue into the next part of the conversation, which is obviously the origin story of Orita, but in its current version. Tell us all about Orita.ai, who you are, what you do, mission of the business, and then we'll jump into the real life problems that you're solving.
The very broad vision of our company is to use the proprietary data that brands have in order to deliver the best customer experience possible. And that's a very broad statement, but we focus that in a very narrow sense initially. And for this experience to be as automated as possible. One of the big challenges that a lot of brands have is who to communicate with, who has subscribed or given first-party data to them and somehow. We've all received tons of emails or tons of SMS messages from dozens of brands that we signed up for. And while there's a lot of like platforms that support that sort of communication, and even though there's a lot of new machine learning and artificial intelligence in terms of helping generate that sort of content, actually figuring out which person on that same million subscriber list should be contacted right now is a very difficult problem. And that was something that we noticed that brands kept running into. And so we said, let's put our hat on here. We've never had more data than at any given time of what customers are doing precisely on a millisecond timescale. So we can probe and get an accurate idea of looking at all the different customer touch points that brands and customers generate, who's active on site, who's clicking on emails, who's responding to text messages. Say you have a million subscriber list, who's actually engaged with that content right now. It's really interesting because in this field of email specifically, which is where we're focused right now, there is a concept called email deliverability. Email is very special as a marketing channel because it has a strong sense of memory. How your emails performed in the past, how the people who responded to the content that you sent in the past directly affects how that email will be received in the future. That's not true of a lot of other things. I send out a catalog to 1 million people today, and then I pay to send out a catalog to 1 million people next week. They'll all receive it, no matter what they did with those catalogs before. Email's different. If I send out 1 million emails and a bunch of people mark them as spam, or they don't open them, or they unsubscribe, I can pay to send out 1 million emails to the same people next week, and most of them won't see them because they'll be in a spam box. Email is a very specific way where they have these inbox providers that use a ton of machine learning. They have a ton of people with my background that determine whether or not bulk email senders, like brands, where those emails should go. And so email is this very interesting channel where if you actually send less messages to higher engaged people, you might actually make more revenue from that. So that non-linearity is called email deliverability, and it's a ripe problem for machine learning. And so that's exactly what we do.
I love this topic because it's one close to my heart. So I want to jump straight into the how. So if we were talking to a customer right now who had a lot of investment in email marketing but wasn't seeing the rate of returns, how do you communicate the possibilities of what could be done with Orita's help, and then putting the spotlight on the AI, machine learning, data science component? Give us some insight into the how behind it all. Obviously, you don't want to give away your secret sauce too much, but help us visualize the journey from here's the problem and here's how we solve it.
The first thing that I would say is, and this is a little bit counterintuitive, which is why we talk about email. Most people understand the concept of email deliverability, but the question is like how to actually solve it. And so what we have to realize is that you have to take the view, both the bottoms up approach, which means on a per email subscriber perspective, what is the best decision to make? And then on the aggregate, almost like a game theory sort of perspective, like if we then send this to 1 million people in aggregate, what could possibly be the effect of that action? And when you look at from both of those perspectives, you can actually come up to a more optimal answer. That's a little bit of a different way, but that's the way in which we approach this. So the major things, so to take a step back is to answer like, how do people try and solve this problem now? The way that people try and solve this problem now is that they come up with some sort of rough rule of thumb of what engagement looks like. Typically something like, if they haven't opened an email in 30 days, or they haven't clicked an email or visited the website in 120, we should probably stop emailing. Those kind of rules of thumb fail in certain ways, right? Let's say that let's say the rule is haven't clicked an email in 90 days. So we have one person who clicked an email yesterday. I clicked 89 days ago. You clicked 91 days ago. The two of us, so me and that other first person, we get an email and you don't. You and I are actually more similar in our behaviors than everyone. So that all or nothing approach that a lot of people use fails. And so what happens is that people that are really similar actually miss out on stuff because you have the arbitrary decision boundaries. By us, what we do is that a brand comes to us, they connect to us their data sources. For our brands currently, that's primarily Shopify, which is their cart transaction, and Klaviyo, which is their email marketing platform. And what happens is that we look at all that customer data and we build models on top of it. But the first step that's really important is that we look at everything: clicks, opens, abandoned carts, viewed products. And there could be CRM tickets, there can be on-site quizzes, all these sorts of things. And so you can look at hundreds or thousands of different types of unique customer touch points, billions of events. That allows you to build an unbiased model. Now you're not just looking at click yes or no 90 days. You're looking at potentially thousands of different things and seeing how they interact with each other. Then you have to also can look at things from a probabilistic perspective. What is the likelihood that JP is going to take a negative action, mark you as spam, or they're not going to respond, or they're going to click and lead to some sort of down behavior? And from that, you can basically rank all the different customers. And then that combined together is like at any given time, like, hey, you have a 1 million subscriber list. Actually, these 200,000 people are an actively bad idea to message. So let's not message them. And the 800,000, you can message in whatever way you fit. That kind of optimization problem is constant and dynamic. Everything shifts all the time. For a lot of our brands, you can imagine that like during Black Friday and the holiday season, that's when the most activity is for the most purchases. So clicks and active on sites are really informative of buying behavior, but might not be at the rest of the year. So you have to look at the context of these events, when they occur, in the life cycle of a brand, in the life cycle of a customer. All of that has to be constantly evolving. And so that's why machine learning can really play in a forefront.
You are listening to the Alldus podcast. When you're looking to scale your team, or if you are interested in showcasing your company in a future episode, reach out today. Or if you're in the market for a new role, visit our website to view open positions, www.alldus.com.
Talk to us a little bit more about the machine learning and AI side of things, specifically through the lens of the team that you've built, the backgrounds, the environment, the project life cycle. If we were to look behind the scenes of the current AI and data org, what does it look like?
So, we're a relatively new company. We have 8 full-time employees and then a couple other members of the team who are part-time or on a contract basis. And to give you an idea of our team, of those 8 that are full-time, 4 of them are machine learning engineers, right? And I'm including myself and my co-founder, Zach, in there, and we're the CEO and CTO. So we have other responsibilities, but that gives you the seriousness to which we use machine learning engineers. And all of our backgrounds are slightly different. We have one who was a former physicist. Zach also studied physics as well. I used to be a neuroscientist, and then we have one who has a PhD in computer science. And we all are slightly different flavors of machine learning engineers. We actually selected for that. And so it gives us these rich discussions of how exactly should we solve the problem in the best way. We're actually not married to a particular type of machine learning. We're not like we do LLM, blah, 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 blah. But what we're really focused on is exactly what type of problems are we trying to solve and what are the best solutions in order to do that, irrespective of the particular algorithms that we're using at any given time to solve that.
Thank you for that, Daniel. It's great to hear that from a startup perspective, both you and your co-founder are still heavily involved on the engineering side, because that always creates a good culture of getting stuff done from the ground up. And I know it's already working. You and I were talking off air about some of the recent examples of how this is already impacting your customers from a positive standpoint. Are there any recent examples that you could share with us about Orita's platform or product being deployed with a customer, what the problem was prior, and what solution you guys were able to present to them?
A really good example, and we have this case study on our website if anyone wants to go check it out, is this company called Birthdate. And Birthdate sells candles. And they're a great team and they have a great set of products and they do really well. But they did suffer a little bit from these deliverability issues. There's many different ways to measure this, and they use Klaviyo as their marketing automation platform. But just to give a little bit of sense of where they are, there's this idea called a sender score, and they have a Klaviyo sender score, and it's in what's called a deliverability hub. It's out of 100, and basically it's a combination of how many people are unsubscribing, how many people are marking you as spam, how many people are opening and clicking your email. But it's like this integrated measure of like your email health. They were hovering around a 60 when we first started working with them earlier this year. Within the first month, they doubled their click rate, and they went from a Klaviyo Center score of around 60 to 91. This was a combination of several factors. One is that when we talk about email deliverability, we talk about unengaged people and all these sorts of things like, hey, actually, JP is not really interested in hearing you right now, so why don't we temporarily stop sending you messages? That's one aspect of it. But there's also the other aspect of it that there's these non-human actors that can affect deliverability, bots, right? You could be subject to what's called list bombing, which is a type of hack where people have not consented and now they're going to mark a bunch of your stuff as spam, or there's spam traps and stuff like that. So we do both, where we eliminate what we call non-human actors that can negatively affect your deliverability, as well as then measuring what the real people are doing and determining which one of those actually are engaging in content, which one aren't. When you do that at scale, what happens is that you see a 30-point increase in your Klaviyo sender score. And that means that now your emails, which were ending up in spam in the promotions tab in Gmail, start ending up in the promotions and the inbox tab. That increase in reachability is really the core aspect of why you should care about deliverability. And so they're an example, but we do that for a lot of different companies. But like that is a very precise example of like how fast these sorts of things can change once you take a machine learning approach to measuring engagement with content.
So as you mentioned, Daniel, you guys are still early in your journey building from the ground up, but given the success that Orita has already had with customers in demonstrating value add and the scale of the market opportunity, there's so much to go at. So where is your focus looking at over the next 1 to 2 years, both in the current iterations of Orita's services, and where could this evolve as marketing changes, email content changes? Where do you see the business and the technology evolving?
There's a couple things. The quip that I usually have is that after a month or two of using Orita, most of our customers go, cool. All right, like the model told me who not to message, and now all these things are improved. Now tell me who to message, and tell me what content to send them, right? We call it like getting your health in order. And then from that, you have this engaged pool, and now you can optimize what sort of content they're seeing and what sort of schedule. So that's the stuff that we're working on, is the more proactive way in order to grow revenue by actually increasing conversions in that way, as opposed to just improving their overall email health system, which is a large aspect of what we do. But then there's lots of different channels that people communicate on. A lot of brands use SMS, and they use direct mail, they do retargeting ads, they use social media. And so that kind of cross-channel behavior is also where we're going to be expanding. So we proved that we're really effective in email, and if someone's unengaged in email, maybe sending an SMS message is the best way to go. So those are the sorts of ways in which we think about where we're expanding to. Increasing the type of channels that we offer and the sort of cross-channel optimization. And then once you have that engaged audience, what sort of content and timing of that content should that person see?
Thank you for that, Daniel. And look, as you mentioned when you were explaining the current makeup of the team, there's a huge emphasis on the engineering component. 50% of the org is machine learning engineering. And as you guys continue to grow and scale on the customer side, you're going to need to supplement that with more talent on the engineering component, making sure the AI capabilities stay relevant. So when you're speaking to candidates, ML engineer candidates, data engineer candidates, data science candidates, about what you're building at Orita, the company, the mission, the environment, the impact, what is it that you've been telling people that gets them excited enough to join you guys over some of the other great companies also trying to hire?
It's interesting. What's funny is like we kind of have a little bit of the tone of our company and the tone of like our copy and stuff like that is a little bit irreverent. And I think that that in of itself appeals a lot to different types of engineers. Like cheekily, I always say that companies pay us to learn how to market less. And that's actually a very appealing idea to a lot of engineers. Like because we're all helping brands do this stuff, but we're also all consumers, right? And so what we're really trying to do is improve the signal to noise ratio of marketing and all the different marketing channels. And what that might mean is that it might mean a rapid decrease in irrelevant emails, which is something that is extraordinarily appealing to a lot of machine learning engineers. And so what happens is that a lot of the engineers, people and engineering folks that we talk to are really aligned with the overall mission, which is let me get the content when it makes the most sense for it to land on my plate. And so that mission, which is the primary goal of ours, is very appealing. And then, as I said, like the ways in which you can approach that is very broad. And so we deal with huge amounts of data, tons of different types of things, time series data, event data, large amounts of text data and stuff like that. So any type of machine learning engineer or data engineer like that, like there's probably something that we're doing that they'd be interested in, right? Like we focus very specifically on what we're trying to solve, but the data itself is extremely rich. And so oftentimes in our process, when we're hiring ML engineers, instead of having some sort of take-home code test, what we usually do is we send over, hey, these are 6 prompts of problems that we've been thinking about. Choose one and we'll just discuss it. And what's been really exciting to see is that most of the ML engineers that we've interviewed have loved that process because they love the problems that we're trying to solve. Oftentimes it makes their inbox a little bit cleaner, but it's just like a very fun way to tackle this sort of space in a little bit of a cheeky way, not so self-serious. So that's kind of has been our approach.
Daniel, thank you so much for coming on today and talking to us. Really appreciate you sharing not only your own background, but the origin story behind Orita.ai and the field that you're in. Given the increase in challenges that this field presents from a marketing standpoint, we know that AI can help disrupt it on both sides. And by models and machine learning models have made the traditional methods of mass mailing more restrictive, but it's also created an opportunity for companies like Orita to be innovative and help brands reach their target audience in a more effective manner. And that's applicable to all industries. So there's a huge potential here. So we wish you, the team, and everyone at Orita the very best of luck in the months and years to come, and look forward to having you back on the show again in the near future.
Oh, this was an absolute blast. It was so great to chat with you about everything, JP, and I'm looking forward to my invitation down the line. Thanks so much.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the Alldus podcast. If you enjoyed today's episode, don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review. We are available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and any Android podcast of choice. You can also head over to our website, www.alldus.com, to listen to more podcasts, view our open roles, and stay up to date with industry news. Thanks for listening, and stay tuned for more great episodes coming very soon.